Now I'm going to stick with my printed out reference image to work from, but lots of people work from an image on their computer or on their phone, which is quite handy because it's backlit to increase the level of detail and you can zoom in and out, but we're going to work with this for the purposes of explaining the colour work. Before I start colouring in, I like to get an idea of my colour palette, and I use my reference to try and pick out the colours I'm going to use. So I've got this kind of cheat, which is a little bit of it's a piece of cardboard with a hole in it. A lot of artists have these. They're kind of like, you can buy them and they have tonal values on them, or you can make your own, and all it does is it allows you to focus in on various bits of your reference and kind of helps you to zoom in and pick out the colour. You may not need this, but I find it quite helpful if there's lots of different colours going on in a reference. The colour pencil I'll be using today is Polychromos by Faber Castell. These are oil-based pencils. You get quite a lot of detail in with them because they're quite hard. They have quite a hard lead, but they're also really, really good at blending. I like these pencils a lot. They're one of 3 or 4 different brands that I use. So we're going to start with using these, and I'm going to get my colour picker out and see if I can kind of, I know that there's a very sort of, there's a pale yellow in here, really underneath, I think sort of the background, and then there's a kind of a greeny colour, and then I might even want to add a proper green, deeper green there. Going around and see, I can see a bit of an orange colour, the overlapping of the yellow and the red, so perhaps this one. And you'll go through and you'll pick out your colours, and you might not use all of them, and you might end up grabbing some other colours from your colour pencil selection. But it's just, it can help sometimes to have the selection of colours to start off with, at least the first 3 or 4. So it's a very dark purple there. And maybe there's a bit of brown because of the, yeah, there's a bit of brown because of the stalk. So I'm going to start off with these and maybe add some more colours in, but I'll start off with those. My base colour is going to be that very pale yellow that you saw. As I'm going to lay down the base colour. I'm going to colour the whole thing in with light, round, circular strokes. Don't go too heavy, but just make sure you colour the whole thing in and try and keep it as even as possible. We're going to work on the next layer. I'm going to start in with the pale green colour and pick out some of these areas here. I'm probably going to do another layer over this layer with this pale green, but press harder on the areas where I can really see the green coming through. Okay, now I've put the green colour down, I'm going to start using a paler, warmer, orangey yellow to pick out these darker red bits. I'm going to use this colour first and not go in with the darker red colours because I don't want to lay down a colour and then not be able to take it away again. So I'm going to use this colour, because there is some orange in there, to actually kind of block out the areas of light red and darker red and almost like a sort of orangey red here, first of all, before I start putting the darker red colours in. Okay, I've finished blocking in the orange colour, and now I'm going to go in with a slightly darker kind of pinky red colour, and I've picked this out obviously from the slightly lighter red areas of the apple, and I'm going to block in some of the redder areas in a bit more detail now. I'm going to start pulling this one in almost like a block, and I'm going to start colouring in the edges of the apple. Okay, next up I'm going to put a little bit of this sort of mid-green colour to pick up on the darker green elements that you can see around the top of the apple. I'm just going to work these in with a little bit of pressure to make sure that you can really see them. Okay, now the green is done. The next colour is going to be this very sort of bright scarlety red. I'm going to try to work into all of the darker red colours and try and make them even more defined. I want to work up to this kind of dark, almost black curranty purpley red here on the bottom edge of the apple, but I'm going to kind of layer the colours up and get redder and darker as I go. So I'm going to start with this one. Right, I'm done with the Scarlet Red. What I would recommend in order to get these kind of slightly more open patchy areas, which I'm trying to mimic on the apple here, is to use less pressure and just allow sort of spaces in between the red patches so you can see the green and the yellow coming through to create the kind of, it's a slightly kind of dappled effect with the red on top of the green. And just keep working over it and over it and over it until you get the desired effect. I'm going to pick up my darker sort of maroony red, which I'm picking out here on the darker elements and some of these edge bits here, and I'm going to go in and try and block those areas out. Okay, that's the burgundy purple colour laid down to pick out these darker areas here. Now we're going to go back in with a couple of colours we've already used, the yellow and the red. I'm going to use the red to blend between the red and the yellow of the apple here and blend between the dark purple and the red to try and make a sort of smoother transition between the two. And I'm going to use the yellow to do something similar. I'm going to use the yellow to smooth out and blend between the yellow and the red, these kind of dappled areas that are still a little bit patchy and I'd like them to be a bit smoother. Okay, we're going to go in and do that now. Right, next I'm going to be tackling the apple stalk. I'm going to put a layer of colour on first. I'm using this very dark yellow-green colour. Okay, next I'm going to go in with this orangey brown colour and I'm going to use that to outline some of the detail on the apple stalk and also block out some of the shadow. Next I'm going to use a dark to mid brown to pick out the darkest shadowy areas and the rest of the dark detail around the top of the stalk. Lastly, for the stalk, I'm going to use black. I'm going to use a very, very, very small amount just to pick out some of the darkest details and a little bit on the shadow edge, just to punch it out a little bit more. Okay, lastly, I'm going to talk about the small shadow underneath the apple here. Again, I work up from light to dark, and I'm going to start with a very, very, very light grey to lay down the kind of overall shape of the shadow and the extent of the shadow. Now I'm going to go in with a slightly darker grey. This is a kind of mid grey, and I'm going to blend in the darker areas. Now we go darker, a dark grey. Make sure you carefully blend each of the greys as you layer them on top of each other, and make sure that you blend them out lightly away from the apple. So you want to be darker towards the apple, and then as I go further out I want to use less pressure and blend it into the lighter greys that are underneath. There you have it, an apple drawn from scratch in colour pencil. I hope you enjoyed it.